She chose my richest friend. Then came begging years later, my name is Daniel. And if someone had told me 10 years ago that the woman I loved would leave me for my richest friend, only to return years later begging for a second chance, I would have laughed. Not because it sounded impossible, because I trusted her too much. I believed she was different. I believed what we had was real. And that's exactly why her betrayal nearly destroyed me. Even today, there are moments when I remember the look on her face the night she walked away. Not sadness, not regret, confidence. The confidence of someone who believed she was making the best decision of her life. And maybe at that moment, she truly believed it. But life has a strange way of teaching lessons that money can never buy. And the lesson waiting for her was far more painful than she could ever imagine. But before I tell you how she came back into my life years later, standing at my front door with tears in her eyes, you need to understand how everything started. Because every betrayal has a beginning, and ours started with love. I grew up in a small town where everybody knew everybody. Life wasn't glamorous. My parents worked hard every day to provide for our family. We never had expensive vacations. We never drove luxury cars. But we had something many wealthy families didn't have. We had each other. My father always told me something that stayed with me throughout my life. Daniel, money comes and goes, character stays. Back then, I didn't fully understand those words. Years later, I would. After college, I moved to the city to build a career. The city was overwhelming at first. Tall buildings, busy streets, thousands of people rushing everywhere. For months, I felt like I didn't belong there. I rented a tiny apartment that barely had enough room for a bed and a table. Every morning, I woke up before sunrise and traveled almost an hour to work. The pay wasn't great, the hours were long, but I was determined. I believed that if I worked hard enough, eventually things would get better. At the time, success seemed very far away. But then something happened. I met Sophia. The first time I saw her was inside a coffee shop near my office. She was sitting by the window reading a book. There was nothing dramatic about the moment. No music, no magical feeling, just a simple glance. Yet something about her caught my attention. Maybe it was her smile. Maybe it was the way she looked completely relaxed while everyone else seemed stressed. Whatever it was, I couldn't stop looking at her. A few days later, I saw her again. Then again. Eventually, I gathered enough courage to speak to her. "Hi," I said awkwardly. She looked up and smiled. "Hi." That single smile instantly made me forget everything I had planned to say. She laughed. "You seem nervous." "I am." That made her laugh even harder. And somehow, that awkward conversation turned into coffee. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long phone calls. And before I knew it, Sophia became the most important person in my life. For the next 3 years, we were inseparable. At least that's what I believed. Sophia was beautiful. But it wasn't her appearance that attracted me. It was her energy. She made ordinary days feel special. We could spend an entire evening walking through the city and still have endless things to talk about. When work became stressful, she encouraged me. When life felt difficult, she reminded me not to give up. Slowly, she became part of every future plan I had. Whenever I imagined the years ahead, she was always there. I thought she felt the same way, and honestly, maybe she did, at least in the beginning. But looking back now, I can see signs that I completely ignored. Small signs, tiny warnings. Moments that seemed harmless at the time, yet they were quietly revealing the truth. A truth I wasn't ready to see. Around that same time, my career started improving. I received a promotion. My salary increased slightly, nothing extraordinary, but it felt like progress. I was proud of myself. Unfortunately, Sophia didn't seem as excited. One evening, we were having dinner together when she asked a strange question. "Do you ever wish you were rich?" I laughed. "Who doesn't?" She didn't laugh back. "I'm serious." I shrugged. "Of course it would be nice, but I'm happy with what I have." She stared at me for a moment, then she looked away. That conversation seemed insignificant at the time, but it wouldn't be the last. Over the following months, she started talking more and more about money. Luxury homes, expensive vacations, designer clothes, high-end restaurants. At first, I thought she was simply dreaming about a better future. Everyone dreams. There was nothing wrong with that, but eventually something started feeling different. Whenever she saw wealthy people, her attention changed. Whenever she saw expensive lifestyles online, she became fascinated. I noticed it, but I ignored it, because love has a way of making us blind. Then there was Ethan, my best friend, the man who would eventually change everything. I had known Ethan since college. Unlike me, Ethan came from an extremely wealthy family. His parents owned multiple businesses. Money had never been a problem in his life. While I worried about paying rent, Ethan worried about choosing between luxury cars. Despite our different backgrounds, we became close friends. Or at least I thought we were friends. Ethan was charismatic, confident. The kind of person who could walk into a room and instantly become the center of attention. People naturally liked him, women especially, yet he never seemed interested in serious relationships. Everything was temporary, everything was a game, and that's why I never imagined he would become interested in Sophia, because he knew how much she meant to me, or at least he should have. The first time Sophia met Ethan was at a birthday party. I remember introducing them. "Sophia, this is Ethan," she smiled. "Nice to meet you." Ethan smiled back. And for a brief second, I noticed something, a look, a spark, something I couldn't explain, but it disappeared so quickly that I convinced myself I had imagined it. Looking back now, I hadn't imagined anything. That was the beginning, the exact moment everything started changing. Over the next year, Sophia and Ethan saw each other occasionally at gatherings and social events. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. At least that's what I told myself. But small things started happening. Sophia suddenly became interested in events she normally disliked. Events Ethan attended. She laughed harder at his jokes, paid closer attention to his stories, asked more questions about his travels, his businesses, his lifestyle. At first, I ignored it. Then I started feeling uncomfortable. One night after a party, I finally brought it up. "Do you like Ethan?" She looked shocked. "What? You seem interested in him," she laughed. "He's your friend." "That's not what I asked." She rolled her eyes. "Daniel, you're being ridiculous." Maybe I was, maybe I wasn't, but something inside me felt uneasy. For the first time since we started dating, doubt entered my heart. And once doubt enters, it's difficult to remove. Unfortunately, I still had no idea how right my instincts were, because while I was busy building a future with Sophia, Sophia was slowly becoming fascinated by a life she believed I could never give her. And soon, that fascination would become betrayal. If someone asks me today when I first started losing Sophia, I wouldn't say it happened the day she left. I lost her long before that. I just didn't realize it. The truth is, betrayal rarely happens overnight. It grows slowly, quietly, like a crack in a wall. At first, you barely notice it. Then one day, the entire structure collapses. And by then, it's already too late. A few weeks after that conversation about Ethan, things between Sophia and me began to change. Not dramatically, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for me. She started replying to my messages later than usual. Our conversations became shorter. When we spent time together, she seemed distracted. Sometimes I would catch her staring at her phone and smiling. The moment I looked at her, she would quickly lock the screen. Whenever I asked what was so funny, she always had an answer ready. "Just something online. Just a friend. Just a joke." At first, I believed her. After all, trust is supposed to be the foundation of a relationship. Without trust, love cannot survive. But the more I ignored my instincts, the louder they became. Something was wrong, I could feel it. I just couldn't prove it. Around that time, Ethan's presence in our lives increased. He began inviting us to more events. Luxury restaurants, private parties, weekend trips, places I normally couldn't afford on my own. Whenever Ethan paid for everything, Sophia seemed impressed. Very impressed. I remember one particular evening that still makes me shake my head. The three of us were sitting at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. The view was beautiful. The food was incredible. The entire place screamed wealth. As Ethan talked about a recent trip to Europe, Sophia listened with complete attention. Every word fascinated her. Every story captured her imagination. Meanwhile, I sat quietly beside her. For the first time in our relationship, I felt invisible. Eventually, Ethan excused himself to take a phone call. As soon as he left, Sophia turned toward me. "Can you imagine living like this every day?" I smiled. "It would be nice," she sighed. "No, it would be amazing," I laughed. "Maybe someday," her expression immediately changed. "Maybe, what do you mean?" "I mean maybe," she looked frustrated. "Daniel, don't you want more?" I frowned. "More what?" "More success." "More money, more ambition." I stared at her. "I work hard every day." "I know. Then what's the problem?" She looked away. For a moment, I thought she might finally tell me what was really bothering her. Instead, she simply said, "Forget it." But I couldn't forget it. Because for the first time, I felt like she was comparing me to someone else. And deep down, I already knew who that someone was. As months passed, my relationship with Sophia became increasingly complicated. We argued more often, not about major issues, small things, stupid things, things that never used to matter. Every disagreement seemed to create more distance between us. Meanwhile, Ethan appeared more frequently than ever. Sometimes he would call Sophia directly, sometimes he would text her. Whenever I questioned it, she acted offended. "He's your friend." The same answer, over and over again. Eventually, I stopped asking, not because I trusted the situation, because I was tired. Tired of feeling jealous, tired of feeling insecure, tired of feeling like the bad guy. I convinced myself that everything was fine, that I was overthinking, that I was imagining problems that didn't exist. Looking back now, that was my biggest mistake. One Saturday afternoon, I received a call from Ethan. "Hey, man. Want to grab dinner tonight?" "Sure. Bring Sophia too." Nothing unusual. At least that's what I thought. That evening we met at another expensive restaurant. Throughout the meal, Ethan and Sophia seemed unusually connected. They shared inside jokes. They laughed at things I didn't understand. At one point, Ethan mentioned a conversation they had earlier that week. My stomach immediately tightened. A conversation, earlier that week. Sophia had never mentioned it. I stayed quiet. But inside, questions started building. How often were they talking? How much time were they spending together? And why was I learning about it from Ethan? For the rest of the evening, I barely spoke. Something felt wrong, very wrong. Later that night, after we returned home, I finally confronted her. "How often do you talk to Ethan?" She looked annoyed. "Seriously, answer the question. Sometimes, sometimes, yes. How much is sometimes?" She crossed her arms. "Why does it matter?" "Because you're my girlfriend. And he's your friend." There it was again, the same excuse, the same shield, the same way of avoiding the truth. I took a deep breath. "Would you be comfortable if I talked to another woman every day?" For the first time, she hesitated, only for a second, but I noticed it. Then she said, "That's different." I laughed bitterly. "No, it isn't." The argument lasted nearly an hour. Neither of us slept well that night. And from that moment forward, something between us broke, not completely, but enough to change everything. The following months were some of the most confusing months of my life. Part of me wanted to trust Sophia. Part of me wanted to believe our relationship could survive. But another part of me was preparing for disaster. I started noticing things I had ignored before. Her excitement whenever Ethan called. Her sudden interest in luxury brands. The way she compared successful people to everyone else. Most importantly, the way she no longer looked at me the same way. Love is difficult to describe. But when someone truly loves you, you feel it. You see it in their eyes, their actions, their attention, their presence. And little by little, those things were disappearing. Then came the moment that should have opened my eyes completely. One evening, I arrived at a restaurant where Sophia and I had planned to meet. She wasn't there. I waited. 10 minutes, 20 minutes. 30 minutes, no message, no call, nothing. Finally, I decided to leave. As I walked toward the parking lot, I noticed a familiar car, Ethan's car, parked near the entrance. At first, I didn't think much of it. Then I saw them. Sophia and Ethan walking together, laughing, completely unaware that I was watching. My heart sank, I stood frozen, trying to understand what I was seeing. Maybe it was innocent, maybe it was a coincidence, maybe there was an explanation. But explanations became harder to believe when I watched Ethan gently place his hand on her back. The gesture lasted only a second, yet it felt like a knife through my chest. I immediately called Sophia. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen, then declined the call right in front of me, without knowing I was there. At that moment, my world started falling apart. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every possible explanation ran through my mind. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe there was a reason. Maybe everything wasn't what it seemed. But deep down, I already knew. People don't hide things unless there's something to hide. The next morning, I called Ethan. "Where were you last night?" There was a pause. Then he answered casually. "At home." The lie came so easily, so naturally. As if it meant nothing, I felt my stomach twist. My best friend had just lied directly to my face, and suddenly everything became clear. The secret conversations, the growing distance, the strange behavior, the missing trust, the uncomfortable feeling I'd been carrying for months, it all pointed to the same conclusion. The two people I trusted most were hiding something, something big, something capable of destroying everything. And the worst part, I still wasn't prepared for how bad the truth actually was. Because within a few weeks, I would discover that the relationship I had spent years building was already over. Sophia simply hadn't told me yet, and when she finally did, the betrayal would be far worse than anything I had imagined. There are moments in life that divide everything into two parts: the life you had before and the life you have after. For me, that moment arrived on a cold Thursday evening, a day that started like any other, a day I thought would be ordinary. Instead, it became the day my heart was shattered into pieces. Even now, years later, I can remember every detail: the weather, the silence, the expression on Sophia's face, and the feeling that my entire world was collapsing while I stood there helplessly watching it happen. For weeks after seeing Sophia with Ethan, I lived with constant anxiety. Every conversation felt forced, every smile felt fake, every promise felt empty. I wanted answers, real answers. But whenever I tried talking about what was happening, Sophia became defensive. Sometimes she got angry, sometimes she acted hurt, sometimes she accused me of being insecure. Eventually, I began questioning myself. Maybe I was paranoid, maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the stress was affecting my judgment. But deep inside, another voice kept whispering the truth. Something was wrong, very wrong, and sooner or later the truth would reveal itself. That Thursday evening, Sophia called me. Her voice sounded strange. Calm, too calm. "Can we meet tonight?" she asked. "Of course. We need to talk." The moment I heard those words, my stomach tightened. Nobody says we need to talk before sharing good news. For the next few hours, I couldn't focus on anything. My mind raced through countless possibilities. Maybe she wanted a break. Maybe she wanted space. Maybe she was unhappy. But even then, I never imagined how painful the truth would be. We met at a small park where we used to spend time together. Ironically, it was one of our favorite places, a place filled with happy memories, a place that would soon become the location of my worst memory. Sophia was already there when I arrived. She sat quietly on a bench staring at the lake. When she saw me approaching, she stood up. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I finally asked, "What's going on?" She looked away. And in that moment, I knew whatever was coming next would change everything. "Daniel," she said softly, my heart started pounding. "I don't think this is working anymore." Those words hit me like a punch. Even though part of me expected them, hearing them out loud was different, much different. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. "I think we've grown apart." I stared at her. Grown apart? Yes. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. 3 years together, 3 years of memories, 3 years of plans, reduced to two simple words. Grown apart. I shook my head. No. That's not the real reason. She remained silent. Tell me the truth, still silence. Sophia. Finally, she looked at me, and what I saw in her eyes broke my heart even before she spoke. Because there was no confusion, no uncertainty, her decision had already been made. Then she said it, the sentence that destroyed everything. I'm seeing someone else. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The sounds around me disappeared, the park disappeared, everything disappeared. All I could hear were those 4 words repeating inside my head. I'm seeing someone else. I already knew who it was, yet somehow I still asked. Who? She hesitated, only briefly. Then she answered. Ethan. I wish I could describe the pain of that moment. But honestly, I don't think words exist. Imagine giving someone your trust, your loyalty, your future. Then discovering they were giving their heart to someone else. Not just anyone, your best friend, the person you trusted almost as much as her. I felt physically sick. My chest hurt, my hands shook. I couldn't breathe properly, and still she continued talking, as if she was explaining something simple, something ordinary, something reasonable. It wasn't planned, she said. We didn't mean for this to happen. Those words made me laugh, not because they were funny, because they were insulting. You didn't mean for this to happen, she looked uncomfortable. It just happened. No, I shook my head. It didn't just happen. For months I had watched the signs, the conversations, the lies, the distance, the secrets. This wasn't an accident. This was a choice, a series of choices, and they had made them together. How long? I asked. She lowered her eyes. I already hated the answer before hearing it. A few months. A few months. While she kissed me, while she told me she loved me, while we planned our future, she was already emotionally involved with Ethan. The betrayal suddenly felt even worse. It wasn't one mistake. It wasn't one moment. It was months of deception, months of lies, months of pretending. Then came the question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. Do you love him? She didn't respond immediately. That hesitation told me everything. Finally, she nodded, and in that instant, something inside me broke completely. Not anger, not hatred, hope. The last piece of hope I had been holding onto vanished. The woman I loved was gone. Maybe she had been gone for a long time. I was simply the last person to realize it. I looked at her for several seconds. Then I asked one final question. Why? Tears appeared in her eyes. For a moment, I thought she might finally admit everything. Maybe she would apologize. Maybe she would tell the truth. Instead, she said something that would stay with me for years. I want more from life. The exact same words she had used before. More, that word again. I laughed bitterly. What does that even mean? She looked away. You know what it means. And unfortunately, I did. Ethan had everything I didn't: money, status, connections, luxury. The lifestyle she dreamed about. The lifestyle I couldn't provide. At least not yet. At that moment, I realized something painful. Sophia hadn't chosen Ethan because he was a better man. She chose the life she believed came with him, and she was willing to sacrifice everything we built to get it. The conversation ended shortly after. There was nothing left to say. No dramatic screaming, no emotional movie scene, just silence, painful silence. Before leaving, Sophia whispered, "I'm sorry." I looked at her. For the first time in 3 years. She felt like a stranger. Then I simply replied, "I hope he's worth it." And I walked away. That night was the darkest night of my life. I returned to my apartment and sat alone in complete silence. Hours passed, then more hours. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every memory replayed endlessly. Our first date, our first kiss, the vacations, the dreams, the promises, all of it felt meaningless now. Every memory hurt, every thought hurt, even breathing hurt. The following weeks were worse, much worse. Sophia officially started dating Ethan almost immediately. The speed alone told me everything. This relationship hadn't started after our breakup. It had started long before. Soon social media was filled with pictures, expensive restaurants, luxury vacations, private events, smiling faces. Perfect lives. Every photo felt like another wound. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop looking. I hated myself for it, yet I kept checking, kept hurting myself, kept searching for answers I would never find. Then came the final blow. One afternoon, I met a mutual friend. During our conversation, he accidentally revealed something. Something that destroyed any remaining illusion. People already knew, for months. Friends had noticed Sophia and Ethan growing closer. Friends had suspected what was happening, some even knew. And nobody told me, nobody. The humiliation was unbearable. I felt like a fool, a man standing in the middle of a storm while everyone else could see the clouds approaching. Everyone except him. For nearly a year after the breakup, my life fell apart. I stopped enjoying things. I isolated myself. Work became the only distraction, the only thing keeping me moving forward. Every morning, I forced myself out of bed. Every day, I forced myself to keep going. Not because I was strong, because I had no other choice. And slowly, without realizing it, that pain started changing me. The heartbreak that almost destroyed me was beginning to create someone new, someone stronger, someone more focused. Someone determined to build a life so successful that nobody would ever look down on him again. I didn't know it yet, but the greatest chapter of my life was about to begin. And years later, the very people who betrayed me would watch from the sidelines as everything they once underestimated. People often think revenge begins when you decide to hurt someone. But that's not true. The most powerful revenge begins the moment you stop focusing on the people who hurt you and start focusing on yourself. I didn't understand that at first. After Sophia left me for Ethan, I spent months trapped inside my own pain. Every morning felt heavy. Every night felt endless. And every memory felt like a wound that refused to heal. There were days when I wanted answers. Days when I wanted justice. Days when I wanted Sophia to feel exactly what she had made me feel. But eventually, something changed. One morning, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back at me. I looked exhausted, defeated, broken. And for the first time, I became angry, not at Sophia, not at Ethan. At myself, because while they were living their lives, I was allowing their betrayal to control mine. That realization changed everything. From that day forward, I made a decision. I would stop looking backward and start building forward. It wasn't easy. Nothing about it was easy. Healing never is. But every day I pushed myself a little harder. I worked longer hours. I learned new skills. I took professional courses at night. I spent weekends studying instead of feeling sorry for myself. Slowly, work stopped being a distraction. It became a mission, a purpose. A way to rebuild the confidence that betrayal had stolen from me. About a year after the breakup, an opportunity appeared. A small one. Most people would have ignored it, but I didn't. At the engineering company where I worked, I noticed a major problem that many businesses were facing. The problem seemed simple, but the solution had enormous potential. For months, I worked on an idea. Every evening after work, every weekend, every holiday, while most people relaxed, I kept building. The project consumed my life, and honestly, I was grateful for it. Because every hour I spent working was one less hour thinking about Sophia. The first year was difficult. The second year was worse. There were countless moments when I nearly gave up. Investors rejected me. Clients ignored me. Some people laughed at my idea. Others told me it would never succeed. But something inside me refused to quit. Maybe it was determination. Maybe it was pride. Or maybe it was the memory of standing in that park watching my life fall apart. Whatever it was, it kept me moving forward. Then something unexpected happened. The project started working. Small clients became larger clients. Larger clients became partnerships. Partnerships became opportunities. And opportunities became growth. Real growth. For the first time in my life, success felt possible. Not guaranteed, but possible. And once I saw that possibility, I chased it with everything I had. 3 years after Sophia left me, my business was generating more money than I had ever imagined. 5 years later, it had grown into a successful company with employees across multiple cities. The small apartment I once struggled to afford became a distant memory. I purchased my first home, then another investment property, then another. For the first time in my life, financial security wasn't a dream. It was reality. Ironically, I had become the exact type of successful man Sophia once wished I could be. The difference was that I didn't build it for her, I built it for myself. As my life improved, something else happened. The pain started fading, not completely, but enough. I no longer thought about Sophia every day, then every week, then every month. Eventually, entire seasons passed without her crossing my mind. And honestly, that felt better than any revenge fantasy I had ever imagined. Because true healing isn't remembering less, it's caring less. One evening, nearly 7 years after our breakup, I attended a business conference. The event brought together entrepreneurs, investors, and executives from across the country. By that point, my company was doing extremely well. I had given speeches, appeared in business magazines, built a reputation in my industry. Life looked very different from the life I once had. I remember standing near the entrance speaking with a client when I noticed someone staring at me. At first, I didn't recognize her. Then my heart skipped a beat. Sophia. For a moment, everything around me seemed to disappear, not because I still loved her, but because I hadn't seen her in years. She looked different, older, more tired, less confident. The vibrant woman who once dreamed of luxury seemed gone. In her place stood someone carrying invisible burdens. When our eyes met, shock appeared on her face, then disbelief, then something else. Regret. Slowly, she walked toward me. "Daniel," I smiled politely. "Hi, Sophia." For a few seconds, neither of us knew what to say, then she glanced around the room. "You own this company?" I laughed. "No, but I'm one of the speakers." Her eyes widened. I had no idea. Of course she didn't. She had spent years focused on someone else's future, not mine. We spoke briefly. Nothing emotional, nothing personal, just polite conversation. But throughout the entire interaction, I noticed something. She kept looking at me the way people look at opportunities they once ignored, as if she was trying to understand how much had changed. And honestly, a lot had changed, not just financially. Emotionally, mentally, personally, I wasn't the same man she had left behind. Before leaving, she asked a question. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" The request caught me off guard. Years earlier, I would have jumped at the opportunity. Now I simply smiled. Maybe. The disappointment in her eyes was immediate, and strangely, I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction. No excitement, nothing. And that's when I realized how far I had come. A few weeks later, I learned something surprising. Ethan's business empire was collapsing. A mutual acquaintance mentioned it during a dinner meeting. Apparently, several bad investments had gone wrong. Very wrong. Millions had been lost. Lawsuits followed. Debt followed. Then panic followed. The luxurious lifestyle Ethan once enjoyed was disappearing. Piece by piece, asset by asset, deal by deal, everything was falling apart. Soon, more information surfaced. The pressure destroyed his relationship with Sophia. Arguments became frequent. Trust disappeared. Financial stress replaced luxury. Eventually, they separated. After years of chasing what looked like a perfect life, the relationship finally collapsed under its own weight. When I heard the news, I expected to feel victorious. After all, karma had finally arrived. The man who betrayed me was losing everything. The woman who chose him was facing the consequences of her decision. Yet surprisingly, I felt nothing. Because by then, their story no longer mattered. I had my own life, my own goals, my own future. And that future no longer included them, or at least that's what I believed, until one rainy evening. An evening that would bring the past knocking directly on my front door. Literally, I had just returned home after a long day. Rain was falling heavily outside. The house was quiet, peaceful. Then suddenly the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors. Curious, I walked toward the entrance. When I opened the door, I froze. Standing there in the rain was Sophia. Alone, soaked. Tears running down her face. The confident woman who once walked away without looking back had completely disappeared. In her place stood someone broken, someone desperate. Someone carrying years of regret. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered the words I never expected to hear. "Daniel. Please." And in that moment, I knew the final chapter of our story had finally arrived. For years, I imagined what I would say if I ever saw Sophia again. Back when the pain was fresh, I imagined 100 different conversations. Sometimes I pictured myself yelling. Sometimes I imagined making her feel the same heartbreak she had given me. Sometimes I imagined proving how successful I had become. But standing there in that doorway, looking at the woman who had once shattered my heart, none of those fantasies mattered anymore. Because reality felt very different. Sophia wasn't standing in front of me as the confident woman who had walked away years ago. She looked exhausted, defeated, broken. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Rain continued falling behind her. The sound filled the silence between us. Finally, she whispered again, "Please, can we talk?" I hesitated. A part of me wanted to close the door. Another part wanted answers. In the end, I stepped aside. "Come in." Sophia entered slowly. As she walked through the house, I noticed the way her eyes moved around the room. Not with jealousy, not with admiration, with regret. Every corner of the life I had built seemed to remind her of something she had lost, or perhaps something she had never truly understood. I handed her a towel and pointed toward the living room. She sat quietly, nervously. The woman who once seemed so certain now looked completely unsure of herself. After a few moments, I sat across from her. Neither of us knew where to begin. Finally, she broke the silence. "You look happy," I smiled slightly. "I am," her eyes lowered, and for a moment sadness crossed her face, not because I was happy. Because she realized she was no longer part of that happiness. For several minutes, we talked about ordinary things: work, life, time, anything except the real reason she had come. Eventually, I decided to stop pretending. "Why are you here, Sophia?" The question hung in the air. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. And suddenly, the confident mask she had been wearing disappeared completely. "I made a mistake." The words came out quietly, painfully, as if admitting them hurt. I remained silent. "I made the biggest mistake of my life." Still, I said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. She already knew the truth. And so did I. Sophia looked down at her hands. "I thought I knew what would make me happy." The tears started falling. "I thought money would solve everything." I listened quietly, not because I enjoyed hearing her suffer. Because I had spent years wanting honesty, and for the first time I was finally hearing it. "When I met Ethan, everything looked perfect." She laughed bitterly. "The trips, the cars, the parties. The lifestyle." Then she shook her head. "It all felt exciting." I already knew where this was going, because deep down I had understood it years ago. Sophia hadn't fallen in love with Ethan. She had fallen in love with the dream he represented. And dreams often look different once you live inside them. She continued speaking. "At first, I convinced myself I loved him." Another painful smile appeared, but eventually I realized something. She looked directly at me. "I wasn't chasing love." The room became silent. "I was chasing comfort." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said something that surprised me. "Do you know what hurt the most?" I shook my head. She wiped away another tear. "The day I realized you were the one person who genuinely loved me." Years earlier, hearing those words would have changed everything. Years earlier, I would have believed them. Years earlier, I would have fought for us. But time changes people. Pain changes people. Growth changes people. And I was no longer the man she left behind. Sophia looked around the room again. Then back at me. "I followed your career." I raised an eyebrow. She nodded. "I saw your company grow. I saw your interviews. I saw everything." Her voice trembled. "And every time I saw another success story, I remembered what I gave up." For the first time that evening, I asked a direct question. "If you had never lost Ethan's money?" She froze. The silence answered before she did. But eventually she whispered, "I don't know." I nodded slowly, because that was the truth, and the truth mattered. After everything that had happened, I didn't need perfect answers. I needed honest ones, and honesty revealed something important. Sophia wasn't here because she had suddenly discovered true love. She was here because life had forced her to confront her choices, and now she was trying to rebuild what she once destroyed. Finally, She said the words I had expected from the beginning. "Can we try again?" The question filled the room. For a moment, neither of us moved. Outside, the rain continued falling. Inside, years of history stood between us. I looked at her carefully. Not with anger, not with bitterness, just clarity. The strange thing was that I no longer hated Sophia. Hatred requires emotional attachment, and that attachment had disappeared long ago. What remained was understanding. Understanding of who she was, and understanding of who I had become. I thought about the young man sitting alone in a tiny apartment years ago. The man who couldn't sleep. The man who questioned his worth. The man who believed he had lost everything. If I could speak to that version of myself, I would tell him something important. "You are not losing your future, you are discovering it." Finally, I looked at Sophia and I answered. "No." The word was calm, gentle, final. Fresh tears filled her eyes. Not because she hadn't expected the answer, because hearing it made the reality unavoidable. The door she once closed was now closed to her. "Daniel," I raised my hand softly, not to stop her. "To save her from more pain. You made your choice years ago." She lowered her head. "I know. You chose the life you thought was better." Another tear rolled down her cheek. "I know." I took a deep breath, then continued. "The problem isn't that you left." She looked up. "The problem is why you left." The room became silent again. Because both of us understood exactly what I meant. Everyone makes mistakes. Relationships fail. People change. But loyalty matters. Character matters. And when difficult decisions arrive, those things reveal who we truly are. "You didn't leave because we stopped loving each other," I said quietly. "You left because you believed someone else could offer more." Her shoulders trembled, because she knew it was true. For years, I had imagined revenge. But standing there, I finally understood something. Revenge had already happened, not because I caused it, because life had. The consequences of her choices had found her naturally, without my help. Without my involvement, without my anger. And suddenly I felt grateful, not for the betrayal, but for the lesson, because losing Sophia had forced me to become stronger, more disciplined, more focused, more confident. Without that heartbreak, I might never have become the man I was today. Eventually, Sophia stood. Slowly, silently, the conversation was over. There was nothing left to say. Some endings don't require dramatic speeches, just acceptance. As we walked toward the front door, she stopped, then asked one final question. "Will you ever forgive me?" I smiled, a genuine smile, the kind that comes from peace. "Already did." She looked surprised, then confused. I opened the door. The rain had almost stopped. The storm outside was ending, just as the storm inside me had ended years ago. "Forgiveness isn't the same as trust," I said. "And it isn't the same as a second chance." Tears filled her eyes once more, but this time she nodded, because she understood. Then she stepped outside, and slowly walked away. No dramatic ending. No final embrace. No last-minute miracle. Just two people moving in different directions. One carrying regret, the other carrying peace. I never saw Sophia again. Occasionally, mutual friends mentioned her. Sometimes they shared updates. Sometimes they didn't. Eventually, even those conversations disappeared. Life moved forward, as it always does. Years later, when people ask me about success, they often assume money was the greatest reward. They're wrong. The greatest reward wasn't the company, the houses, the investments, or the financial freedom. The greatest reward was discovering my own worth. Because for a long time, I believed Sophia's rejection meant I wasn't enough. But the truth was much simpler. Her choice reflected her priorities, not my value. And once I understood that, everything changed. If there's one lesson this story taught me, it's this: never beg someone to see your worth. The right people won't need convincing. The right people won't compare you to someone richer, stronger, or more successful. They'll choose you because of who you are, not because of what you own. Money can disappear, beauty can fade, status can vanish overnight, but character remains. Character reveals itself when opportunities appear. Character reveals itself when temptation arrives. And character reveals itself when loyalty becomes difficult. Sophia chose wealth, Ethan chose betrayal. Both lost something valuable. As for me, I lost the people I trusted most. But in losing them, I found myself. And looking back now, that turned out to be the greatest victory of all.